Allison and I, Jack, have been married for 4 years. Both are in our early 20s, and we are quite enjoying married life. We both have good jobs and have had plans. I'm working hard to get promoted to vice president, and I'm putting my best foot forward. Allison's salary, working as a seamstress at a local factory, was being put aside for a deposit to buy a house. In about 6 months, we'll be able to buy a house, and after my promotion, we'll be able to live on one paycheck, and she'll be able to stop working to have kids. She loves kids and wants to be a mom more than anything. She understands that we need to be financially secure, but if I didn't insist on it, she wouldn't care. It was a Friday in early April, and I got up early to go to work. Today is an important day in the fight for a promotion, as I have a presentation to make on a new product we are working on. There are 3 teams involved in the presentation, and it is understood that the presenter who wins the presentation will get the VP position. We worked hard and our presentation was due at 10 o'clock in the morning. When I came out of the bathroom, Allison was already awake and said, "Good luck with your presentation, and don't forget to come home early. I want to take you out to celebrate and talk about something." I knew I would be exhausted after the presentation, and it would be hard to leave early, but Allison was very forgiving of early mornings, late nights, and all the other things that go along with a lot of stress in a person's life. I am a huge debt of gratitude to her and look forward to a good night. The show went well, and 2 senior board members congratulated me, which told me that we were very close to winning. When I arrived home around 5:30, my mood was great, and as I walked up the stairs, I saw my wife dressed to the hilt and ready to go out. When I saw her, I whistled and asked, "Where are we going?" She gave me an irresistible smile and replied to this new French restaurant. "You've worked so hard to secure our future. I thought you deserved something special." I'm more into burgers and fries, but Allison wanted a special night out, and I could give her that. Her plans clearly included a little lovemaking, and I was looking forward to it. I went into the bathroom to freshen up and change. I thought I heard Allison talking, but left it at that. The restaurant with a large parking lot was just off Castle Street. It is small, but the food is good. I had dined there about a month ago for a business meeting and was anticipating an intimate evening. When we walked in, there were only 2 other couples there, and we reseated in the back in a quiet corner. We talked about the presentation and how it went. We chose appetizers and main courses from the menu, and as the waiter moved away from our table, I noticed an unfamiliar couple enter the room and take a seat without waiting for the waiter. I recognized him. But I couldn't recognize him. He was about 40, in good shape and smelled of money. She's 20-21 at the most, and she looks out of place, too old to be his daughter, but too young to be his companion. She has a large bag in her hands from which she pulled out a clipboard and a few other items, then stood up and walked over to one of the couples. The conversation took a few minutes. She made some notes on the tablet and returned to their table. By this time, the man was already talking to the waiter as if they were friends. I also noticed that Allison was quiet and a little nervous. Also, her phone was on the table, and we have a rule in our house: no phones at the dinner table. Something wasn't right. The girl kept walking over to the other tables, talking for a few minutes, taking notes, then leaving. The man sat impassively talking to the waiter, but clearly not ordering. And I watched as my wife was clearly distracted by something. A young woman approached our table and said, "Hello. My name is Judy. I'm a psychology and ethics student at the college, and I'm conducting a survey that will be part of my final thesis. Would you be interested in participating in it?" I looked at her and said, "I'm sorry, but my wife and I are here for a special holiday, and I don't want to be disturbed. Perhaps if you give us your cell phone number, we will call you back and do it another time." There was a look of utter confusion on her face. It was as if she had been assured that I wouldn't say no, and she wasn't planning on saying no. My wife quickly intervened. "Jack, this girl needs our help. I'm sure we can give her a moment of our time." This was strange to my wife. She couldn't stand that kind of interjection. I said, "Please, not now, we have so much to discuss," but she was persistent, saying, "Please ask your questions." I took a very deep breath, and then the first question came out, "Have you seen the movie Indecent Proposal?" I answered, "No," but my wife said, "No, we haven't, but we know the plot of the movie." I really didn't like this girl, and when I looked at the man she came in with, he had interrupted a conversation with the waiter and was now watching our table, which he didn't do with the others. Judy looked at me, but I refused to look at her. And she said, "Jack. Can I call you Jack? How do you feel about that suggestion and its effect on the marriage?" Unable to resist, I replied, "I have a feeling you don't care if I agree to be called that, but such a suggestion, if accepted by my wife, would result in an immediate divorce." Allison raised her head, but Judy didn't flinch. She asked further, "Do you think you have the right to control your wife's body by denying her something like this?" I laughed. "Absolutely not." My answer said, "If she accepts the offer, I will not interfere with her, but while she is away doing her own thing, I will be in our house dividing bank accounts, packing my bags and filing divorce papers." Judy then asked, "What if the offer was, say, $2 million? Wouldn't that have secured your life? If the offer was worded in such a way that you wouldn't get a dime if you divorced her, would you change your mind?" "She knows me well, Judy," I said, looking her straight in the eye for the first time. "I make enough to live on. I don't need to make a living by selling my wife like a cheap prostitute, and in fact, if she had agreed to that money, I would have given it up in the divorce. Dirty money doesn't bring happiness. So no. This offer won't change what I do." Now I need to go to the bathroom and cancel our order. You've ruined my mood and I'm not hungry anymore. Alice, be ready to leave when I get back. I quickly got up and walked in the direction of the restrooms, stopped at the waiter's counter and said, "Please cancel the reservation for our table. The people you let in are disturbing us, and I don't want to eat here anymore." The waiter looked at me. "But your bill is being paid by this gentleman for helping with the survey, isn't it?" I was confused, so I just turned around and left for the restroom. I had a bad feeling and knew the other shoe was about to drop. Since my last visit to the restaurant, I knew that I could walk around the back of the restroom and stand, so as not to draw attention to myself. I stood and watched my wife typing a text message on her phone. A man's cell phone beeped, and he picked it up and started typing. When he hit send, my wife's phone rang. She picked it up, read, and typed the text, then his phone rang. I watched this for a few minutes, and it was pretty obvious they were texting. I went back to the table. "Who is this idiot with Judy?" Allison looked around and replied, "I don't know why. Oh, something's not right here. He just paid for our food. I think I know him, but I can't identify him, and you seem to be having a pen pal conversation with him," I said as if it was a matter of course. Allison, with a look that told me she'd been figured out, mumbled, "He was just trying to be polite after she interrupted our meal," I replied. "I'm in a bad mood and have lost my appetite. We should go." Allison got flustered and suggested, "No. We can't be that rude. Just sit here and rest while I go to the bathroom." I watched her walk away and noticed she glanced at the man. Judy then came over to me and sat down, putting her hand on the table next to mine and said, "One more question. What figure do you think is reasonable?" I laughed and put my hand on hers. She didn't remove it. I said it doesn't matter if she sells her body for $20 or $2 million, a prostitute is still a prostitute. So no. No amount of money will help. Having said that, I began to squeeze her hand. Her hands were thin and my hands were thick, so the pressure became painful very quickly. She said, "Stop it immediately." I replied, "Not until you tell me what I want to know." By this time, I was close to breaking one of her fingers, so I stopped the pressure, but I didn't let go of her hand. She said, "If you don't stop, I will scream." I only smiled. "Go ahead, but I bet you won't because there's something wrong here, and I doubt you'll want the trouble calling the police when I beat the shit out of you. And right now, I'm so pissed off that's what's gonna happen. Tell me, who is he?" She tried to pull her hand away and I squeezed it again. This time her finger crunched under the pressure and she cried out. I kept pressing and a man came running up. I shouted, Stop or the rest of your fingers will get the same thing. He stopped, and then my wife came over. What's going on? I smiled. Well, Allison, that's exactly what I'm trying to find out. Judy, if you want your hand to stay beautiful, I suggest you answer my question now. With tears in her eyes, she answered, Simon Armitage Jr. I let go of her hand. Get out of here and never come near me again. I looked at this Simon Armitage Jr. and realized who he was. Simon Armitage is the owner of the factory where Allison works, and this is obviously his oldest son. I've met him at a few events, but he was a lowlife who got a job in factory management solely because of his father. He has a reputation as a playboy, and there are rumors of him soliciting married women because he thinks it makes him a big man. Allison came over and sat down. Simon offered us $2 million if I would spend the weekend with him. I accepted since it would provide for us for life. We'll be able to buy a new house without a mortgage, set up trust funds for the kids for college, and start work on our baby as soon as next weekend. We won't need to wait for your promotion. I stared at the table in silence. You said yes, yes, she replied. Just as Simon Armitage Jr. sat down at the table, I didn't move or look at him. Then he said, I can fulfill all your dreams, and all it will cost you is 48 hours of your wife's time. The arrangement is very simple. I will transfer $2 million into your joint account on Sunday night when she calls me to confirm that you are still at home. If you leave, I'll open an account for Allison that you can't touch. It's your choice. I was looking at Allison, but I was talking to him. You can stick your $2 million where the sun don't shine. If my wife wants to be a whore, I don't want her or the money. I'm out of here. If she's in the car, we can still rebuild our marriage, but if she's not, I'll pack up and leave long before she gets back. So, Allison, it's time to decide. Allison looked at me defiantly. Jack, I want the baby now, not in another 2 years while you can secure the funding. This gives us that opportunity and you're going to blow it. I laughed, which apparently discouraged her somewhat. We're not having kids for the foreseeable future. This little prank has damaged my trust in you so much that even if you go with me now, we'll have years of counseling. If you go with him, however, I will never touch your hole with even a 6-foot sanitized barge pole. The look on her face was priceless. And when she spoke, I could feel the drool flying from her mouth. I hate that word. How can you so degrade my dignity by saying it about me? I stood up, dropping my napkin on the food I had just brought, and said, the word is more than appropriate because it accurately describes what I think of that little dramatization and how I now feel about you. I'm leaving, Allison. It's time to decide. I went to leave, and the jerk tried to get up but lost his balance as I put my hand on his forehead, pushed him back into the seat, and watched him topple backwards. I continued walking and a waiter stood in front of me, but I raised my hand as if to push him away, and he silently stepped back. I heard Allison call out my name as the door closed behind me. I briskly walked over to the car, opened the door, and got in. I took a few deep breaths and exhaled, letting the tension drain out of my body before starting the engine. Slowly, I drove past the restaurant. Allison was still there. I picked up the speed and drove home, pulled my suitcase from the closet shelf and started packing. On autopilot, it took me an hour to stow all my clothes and toiletries in several suitcases and black bags. Then the phone rang and it was Allison. She said, "How are you, baby? I'm really sorry about this, but this offer is too good to pass up. I'm going to disconnect the phone now, and I'll see you Sunday around 7. I remained silent, just holding the phone to my ear. The silence was obviously excruciating for her, but I felt numb. She's really going to do this because she thinks it will be good for us. Then she said, "Look, we can discuss it on Sunday when I get back. I want to have the baby as soon as possible, and this will secure his life." I just asked, "And who will be the father?" She was taken aback but answered, "You, of course, not in this life," and I hung up. I packed everything, including the rest of my personal belongings, into the car, went to online banking, the deposit account at home, and withdrew half of it, then went to the online divorce service, filled out the application, paid the fee, and arranged for Allison to be served on Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning. As he left the house for the last time, a car pulled up, and Allison jumped out of it screaming, "Stop, Jack. Stop, it was just a prank, a belated April Fool's joke." The driver was an asshole, and he got out of the car and said, "It was a joke, we thought you were going back to the restaurant. We were there for the last 2 hours. Then Allison got your divorce letter, and we hurried back." I looked at Allison in silence. If this was a joke, it was so bad that it had done irreparable damage to our marriage. "I need to get out of here for a couple days and think." With those words, I got into my car. As I started the engine, I heard her screaming, "Please withdraw the divorce papers." On Saturday afternoon, I was sitting at my brother's house with him and his wife, Becky. Becky had talked to Allison a few hours earlier and came back to tell us about it. "Jack," she began, "I don't think it was a joke, but it certainly wasn't an attempt to sleep with another man either. She's so desperate to have children. She'd do anything. On the other hand, she wasn't really going for it. Her idea was to get you to say you have enough money to take care of her, and then she could say, 'Well, if there's enough money, you shouldn't wait to have kids.' He's her friend at work. But trust me, he's not even remotely interested in having sex with Allison. In fact, he'd probably prefer you, but now she realizes she's created the situation herself where you've lost all trust in her, thinks that if you just had the baby, all the love and trust would come back. The question is, can you do it? It's a killer question. Ever since my best friend, Allison, got pregnant 6 months ago, she's been constantly asking me when we can have kids. The problem is that procrastinating on this shit means I'm not sure about everything, and I definitely don't want to bring a child into a dysfunctional family. I got up from the table and went to bed at 4 in the afternoon so I could have a chance to think. By Sunday, my mind had not cleared. My real problem lies in those 2 hours. If there really had been a setup or a joke or an attempt to force her point of view on the baby, she would have come home immediately. The fact that she didn't mean she has something to talk to Simon about. I also didn't buy the statement, "Simon would prefer you." I decided to let them file for divorce. Whatever happens happens. A month later, Allison, with Simon's help, found a lawyer, and the court ordered 12 counseling sessions over 4 weeks, 3 a week. We sat in front of the counselor, a young woman who looked at me like my first-grade teacher when I couldn't recite the entire alphabet. Allison went on and on about her plan and how it had been devised by Simon. Ironically, Judy was actually a psychology student and was writing a paper on how men react to stressful situations. I was to be her iconic example. When Allison finished, the counselor looked at me and almost spit out the words, "So, Jack, you've heard the whole story. Why are you persisting in divorce while your wife wants and needs you?" "Yep. I thought Jack is going to get the crap beaten out of him 3 times a week for the next 4 weeks. I looked the counselor in the eye and said, "You really believe that?" Because I personally don't. She has a 2-hour black hole on her account. What she did from the time I left the restaurant until she got home, just enough time to get a room, get laid, and go home. I heard Allison take a deep breath and the counselor pulled herself up in her chair. When she started to speak, I said, "I'm not finished yet, and we agreed not to interrupt when others are speaking, so I expect you to follow those rules." She never discussed the 2 hours, gave no explanation or evidence. What happened in those 2 hours is the real story of that evening, but you are only talking about its preparation. The counselor was outraged. "You need to get over it, and then you and your wife can resume your marriage." I stood up and said, "Your job is to find out if our marriage can be saved, not to talk me into staying in a marriage I want to leave. If she doesn't prove to me that nothing happened in those 2 hours, I'm out of here." The counselor reported me to the judge for non-cooperation, and 2 days later, I was back in court. The judge looked me over from head to toe as if he was examining something he had scraped off his shoe. "Why are you refusing to cooperate with the counselor?" I replied, "Perhaps you should listen to the tape of the first session." The counselor stated that I should forget about Allison's misconduct. "Your Honor, it is not the counselor's job to lecture me. I need to know the truth about that night, and both my wife and the counselor are trying to hide it. Cooperation is a two-way street. If they refuse to answer my questions, then I can't honor their request to forgive my wife either, because I don't know what she did." The judge thought for a moment, then asked, "What do you want to know?" I quickly answered, "It's simple. There is a 2-hour black hole in her timeline that she refuses to discuss. I want to know what happened then. My wife refuses to discuss it, and the counselor says I don't need to know that. I'm here today because the counselor wants you to order me to stop asking that question because in her opinion, by asking that question, I'm being uncooperative." The judge rubbed his chin, becoming like a 1920s movie star, then said, "You have a right to know, please sit down." I asked counsel to come forward as a witness. My wife's attorney, who was there with the counselor, stood up and said, "Your Honor, she is not involved in this case. She has her own work to do, and she just wants Mr. Samuels to stop obstructing. Putting her on the witness stand is not going to help that." At this statement, the judge was visibly angered and said, "This lawsuit has been filed by your client and her counsel, claiming that Mr. Samuels is being uncooperative. I see Mrs. Samuels being uncooperative. The consultant is covering for her. Either she testifies or I terminate counseling and grant the divorce. What's it gonna be?" The counselor and the counselor argued very heatedly, but finally, the counselor with some reluctance got up and went to the stand. She took the oath of office and the judge asked, "Do you know what has happened in these 2 hours?" The counselor sat in silence until the judge said, "Madam, I remind you that you are under oath and must answer this question." Softly, so that I could barely hear, she answered, "Yes. I know." The judge tapped his finger on the table waiting for her to begin speaking. And when she did not, said, "Please enlighten the court as to what was there and speak louder this time." Mrs. Samuels and Mr. Armitage moved to the bar next door where they discussed what had happened and how they were going to deal with the aftermath. Mr. Samuels believed that the proposal made to her and Mr. Samuels by Mr. Armitage was the quickest route to the large family she was dreaming of. She expected Mr. Samuels to come back looking for her, but when he sent the divorce notice, she panicked and decided she shouldn't have put the proposal on the table to see if Mr. Samuels would accept it. She now realizes that it was a mistake and wants to forget the whole thing and move on with her life. My role as the counselor assigned to Mrs. Samuel is to make it clear to Mr. Samuels that it was just an offer. And if he rejects it, she will forget about it. The judge laughed and said, "Do you realize what you are saying? You were not appointed to Miss Samuels to force Mr. Samuels to comply with her request. You were appointed by the court to see if their marriage could be saved." At this, the counselor interrupted saying, "But if he can get over the proposal and admit that it has been rejected, the marriage will be saved." The judge looked over his glasses and said, "Counselor, I am terminating these sessions as you are not acting independently. Mr. Samuels," he turned to me, "what do you want out of this hearing?" My counsel looked at me, then stood up and said, "My client wants the divorce to go through." Allison's attorney practically jumped up from his seat. "Your Honor, you can't stop the hearing on that basis. It has to continue. My client wants this marriage to continue." The judge looked at him and said, "If you were playing fair, I would. But you have turned the consultation into a mockery by trying to hide important information from Mr. Samuels. I don't agree with that. I approve of the divorce." An hour later, I arrived home and found Allison sitting on the doorstep in tears. "Why, Jack? All I wanted was a big family, and this was just a means to an end." I took her hand and pulled her into the house. "You set me up, lied to me, and treated me like a fool. You know, the proposal was unacceptable, but you even tried to honor it. I could never be with a woman who did that to me." She continued to cry, saying, "But I want us to be together. I want 4 children with you, and I want us to not need anything." I just shook my head. "Go get your $2 million and then find someone to give you your children. What about me? I could never be with a woman who finds that kind of thing acceptable. Goodbye, Allison." I opened the door and stepped through it into a new world. Whether it'll be better, who knows?